Welcome back, folks, or welcome for the first time if it's your first time here. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be talking about the broad topic of character creation in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Obviously, it's too large of a topic to cover in a single video, but I hope that this video will help out new players get into Pathfinder 2nd Edition, or help more experienced players get a better handle on the system and get a way for making characters in their head for being able to make backups if they need it. Before we get further into the video though, I do need to say that if you're worried about Pathfinder's reputation of being a super crunchy game system, you shouldn't be all that worried. Pathfinder 2e is still more complicated than D&D 5e, but not by an amount that will really matter to basically anyone as long as they're willing to put in a little bit of effort in actually, reading the options available to them. Also, unless you're going out of your way to do it, it's incredibly difficult to make a bad character in 2e. You can basically go with any character concept and make it work. That's the beauty of the system. Without further ado, let's just get into things. Before we get too much into the nitty-gritty of how I like to make a character, we need to talk about tools that will help making characters a lot easier. You can absolutely still make a character with just a pen and a sheet of paper like in the good old days, but Pathfinder has an incredible selection of digital tools that make character creation incredibly simple. The ones that I generally recommend to basically everyone are Pathbuilder 2e and Wanderer's Guide. Both of them are incredible programs that can help manage a character's level ups, their equipment, their spells, basically every single thing about them. Which one I recommend that you use depends on personal preference and which device you're going to be using it on. While there is a version of Pathbuilder 2e that is web-based, it is still pretty early in development, so the Android version is a substantially higher quality as of the time of this video. Wanderer's Guide, on the other hand, can only be found online and on a website, and it works wonders and is really built for that platform. If you're using a phone and you have an Android phone, then Pathbuilder 2e is really unmatched in my mind. It's my favorite way to build a character, but Wanderer's Guide is also very good. So basically, I recommend that you use Wanderer's Guide if you're on a computer, and Pathbuilder 2e if you're on an Android phone. And I haven't actually tested how well Wanderer's Guide works on a phone, but it should still be pretty okay. Normally websites are built with phones in mind now these days. Links to both of these sites will be in the description of the video, so if you want to check those out, just go down there and click on them and experiment with them. If you would want me to make a video going over how to use their interfaces and how you could build a character, let me know, I'd be happy to do that. I am recommending these because they're pretty straightforward, but I'd always be happy to give people more help. The final tool that I'm recommending is Archives of Nethys. It is an online depository of literally every piece of information you could ever want about Pathfinder 2e, like every single feat, every single ancestry, every single class, every single monster, every single item, and literally everything else. It's all that you really need to make a character or to even run an entire campaign, but the other applications make sorting through all of that data much more simple. Now that we've got all of the tools that make things easier out of the way, we can actually get down to the business of making a character. The first step that I personally use is also the one that I find the most important: finding a central concept. However you find this concept is really just up to you. It's how you like to perceive media and find things, so I'm not going to tell you the exact right way, but I will tell you that there's basically no wrong way to find a character concept, so long as you aren't straight up stealing someone's character. Like, generally I would avoid saying, yeah, my character is an elven ranger called Legolas, because that just feels a little weird. Instead, take Legolas as an example, and then build an elven ranger with somewhat similar personality traits, and then make them your own. Personally, I often get my character concepts from just reading through the game system and finding a cool feat or ability that I would want to use for a character, then figuring out how that ability would impact their personality and maybe their history. Or I just think, how would I build this video game character in Pathfinder? And then I build a character based on that video game character to see how I would make it work. And then from there, I make them my own, change up the personality, and bam, I have a character concept that I found via basically video games, but is still a very interesting character to play. There is literally no wrong way to find a character concept, but it can still be a bit of a hard process depending on how creative you are. That's part of the reason why I base mine off of video game characters, is because a lot of the time I have a hard time coming up with an interesting concept, so I find a halfway point where there's already a fully generated character and then I simply change them. Also, there is literally no reason why a character's concept cannot change over time. If you start off a game thinking, okay, I'm gonna kinda base my character off of Legolas, there's no reason why you can't decide, well, no, now that I think about it, I kind of want to take a cleric dedication, even though Legolas is in no way a religious sort of person. Your characters are not set in stone, and you can just adjust them to better fit what you would like to play and what you think would make a better story. Now, once you have your concept in hand, Paizo has conveniently created ABCs of character creation for Pathfinder 2e to guide your process, and those are Ancestry, Background, and Class. These will be determining your ability scores along with pretty much everything else about your character. So let's go in alphabetical order here, though whenever you make your character, you can just go in whichever order you want and do these in any order that you please. For those of you who are coming from a D&D 5e or Pathfinder 1e background, Ancestry is basically just the race from previous games. Essentially, this is where you decide if you're an elf or a human or any of the other 20 options that Paizo has released in the past year. Paizo has a kind of a problem with releasing a stupid amount of ancestries, and it is a very good problem to have. There are a ton of options for Ancestry in 2e, and if you're having a hard time, you can just pick from the common ancestries, as those are a bit more straightforward, a bit more based on common tropes, so it's a lot easier to make a common ancestry character than a rare or uncommon one. As part of your ancestry, you also get to choose a heritage, which represents some kind of culture or physical trait that you have that gives you special abilities. You generally get ability boosts, ability flaws, and ancestry feats based on your ancestry, but don't sweat your choice all that much. Ancestry is generally a flavor option for a character, rather than deciding their core functionality in combat. So long as you don't choose an ancestry that is genuinely horrible for your class, then you'll be just fine and you'll have whatever flavor you actually want to play. Basically, you're not going to cripple your character just because you picked what sounded cool. That's one of the big joys of Pathfinder 2e. The B in the ABCs stands for background, and it is also the simplest part of your character. Your background represents what you did for your life before the campaign that you're in, and it gives you training in one skill and a skill feat from that skill, along with a lore associated with whatever you were doing. There are a bunch of backgrounds that cover all types of characters, and you're bound to find one that works for your character concept. Also, every single background gives 2 ability boosts. 1 to an ability score of your choice, and 1 to one that is associated with the background and profession that you were doing beforehand. This means that you can basically choose any background on any class, as you can always put 1 ability boost into your key ability score for that class. Basically, if you are going to be playing a barbarian and your backstory is that you were a school teacher, it's very, very easy to get a boost to strength and intelligence, meaning that you're going to actually be okay at your former job, and you aren't limited by your class on your ability scores, because your background can really change things up a bit. The last ABC to talk about is class, and it is also the most impactful choice that you're going to be making throughout your entire time with your character. There are a lot of classes in Pathfinder 2e, a lot of them, but it's important to recognize that classes are incredibly varied in what characters can actually do, and one class is not limited to one character concept. Essentially, not all rogues are criminals or thieves, and can represent a large variety of people that are very skilled at what they do. Basically, any archetype of character can be built in every single class. The best way to determine what class you want to be is to read through them, unfortunately because they're very long, but it is really the only way to really get what a class does. You can also watch my videos on the classes, though, if you've got the time for them, but in case you're looking for a bit of a shortcut, though, I'm going to be trying to summarize what makes each class special here, to guide your research, and to give you an idea of what each class's shtick is. Alchemists are masters of potions, bombs, mutagens, and poisons. They're basically mad chemists and make incredibly powerful support characters, along with having some great martial abilities. Barbarians are warriors who get power from their emotions, ancestors, dragons, or really whatever crazy option you chose. They revel in battle and are made of hit points and damage. Bards are full casters that have amazing buff capabilities that can buff the entire party, along with having a bunch of different abilities that boost their abilities with skills. They are absolutely not all about playing music, and not every bard is going to be musical. The name is not entirely accurate anymore, but it is kind of representative of the game's history. The champion class includes paladins, but all warriors of divine power of all shapes and stripes are included within it. They generally have amazing defensive abilities for them and their allies, and they also have some fantastic focus spells. A champion is the closest you can get to a tank in Pathfinder 2e, though I do use that term lightly. Fighters are the simplest type of martial class in the entire game, and for the simple reason they just use weapons better than other people. They are hyper accurate and get more crits than anyone else, and can use their weapons in ways that other characters simply cannot do because they're not as skilled with them. They are monsters with accuracy and are incredibly effective. You know that one scene where the Robert Downey Jr. version of Sherlock Holmes fistfights? That's just the Investigator class in a nutshell. Seriously though, Investigators are an intelligence-based martial class with a ton of amazing skills that are amazing at tracking down very specific leads and types of characters. If you're in an urban or intrigue campaign, Investigators are incredible. Fighter is probably the most simple martial class in the entire game. It is just better with weapons than other people. Fighters are highly accurate and will have the best critical hit rate in the entire game, and will just be able to use their weapons in different ways from other characters to deal with encounters that other classes could only dream of. You know that one scene where the Robert Downey Jr. version of Sherlock Holmes fistfights? That's the Investigator class in a nutshell. Seriously though, Investigators are intelligence-based marshals with incredibly good skills that will be amazing at tracking down specific leads. In an intrigue-based game, they will be incredibly well off. The Magus class is meant for people who want to stab with a sword and magic at the same time. It's that simple. They can put spells that require attack rolls into their weapons and hit with them, and use magic to improve a lot of their other physical abilities. They are the Spellblade class, though they get a lot less spells than a full spellcaster. Monks focus on sheer athletic and physical ability through discipline. They have great offensive and defensive flexibility, and are the most mobile class in the entire game by a wide margin. Plus, they are better at punching people, even better than fighters, as while fighters might be more accurate, monks can punch so much more. Oracles are full divine casters like clerics, but unlike clerics, their powers come from a connection to a cosmic mystery beyond comprehension. This connection gives them powers, but it also hurts them and curses them. They have a scaling curse that hurts or harms them in various amounts depending on how far into it they are, and they can also fit a variety of different roles depending on the curse. They also have incredible focus spells. While Rangers can be Wilderness Scouts, they are much more defined by being the single target martial class rather than any kind of scouting capability. Hunt Prey gives you a bunch of benefits when you're fighting a very specifically designated creature, and makes Rangers incredibly scary whenever they get the ball rolling. The Rogue class is the class with the best skills in the game, and that's not even a question. They get double the number of skill increases and skill feats as everyone else, which is genuinely monumental. Plus, they get sneak attack and a bunch of different ways to debuff people by stabbing them. Also, if you want to get dexterity to damage, rogues are the only class that can get that in Pathfinder 2e. Sorcerers are full casters that can be of any magical tradition, depending on where their powers come from and their blood. If their great-grandfather was cursed by a devil, then they probably have powers related to that. Or they could have been stolen by Fae from their parents and get Fae powers. Regardless, their sheer force of personality and their blood makes them really hard to control and flexible as all hell and back. Summoners form a connection with a very specific creature and form an Eidolon connection with them, and depending on that creature's type, they get access to a different tradition of magic. This Eidolon can then be summoned, and once it is, the summoner is basically just playing two different characters that share actions and health. It's an incredibly cool way to play a character, and your Eidolon can serve a bunch of different functions. It can be a martial character, it can be sort of a spellcaster, it can do all sorts of different things. Swashbucklers are a dexterity-focused martial class that is focused around the idea that it's more important to look cool while doing something than do it well. They can get a bunch of different abilities for skills and a bunch of other offensive and defensive abilities, and generally a swashbuckler will spend their time in combat balancing being in and out of panache, and just doing as much cool stuff as possible even if it might not be the most mechanically viable. Witches are spellcasters that are contacted through a patron, through an animal or some other kind of creature, giving them special powers through their familiar. Their familiars will be the best in the game, and they also get some really incredible focus spells on top of their normal spellcasting. A lot of their spells need to be sustained, though they do get some great abilities and focus spells that help sustain other spells, whether that's be their focus spells or any spells that they cast normally. Basically, they are probably going to be the best at sustaining spells in the entire game, and they don't have to be creepy. But you can absolutely go for that vibe if you want. Whatever image popped into your head when I said wizard was probably right. They are arcane casters who learned magic through study and sheer intelligence. They study out of a spellbook and are all around just cool magical nerds. Plus, they literally have an ability called Arcane Thesis, and that really tells you all you need to know. Wizards are pretty stereotypical, they are exactly what you expect. The Gunslinger and Inventor classes are both uncommon classes, so ask your GM if they are reasonable to allow in the setting. Anyway, Gunslingers are pulled straight out of any Western movie, and focus on using weapons that require actions to reload. That does include crossbows as well, so if your GM doesn't want you to play a Gunslinger because they don't want guns in their fantasy setting, ask if you can play a Gunslinger and just use a crossbow instead. While they normally are ranged characters, like pistoleros or snipers, you can also fight in melee with a gunslinger just as well as at range, or you can just shoot people with magic. It's pretty dang cool. I didn't describe the alchemist as a mad scientist, because that's basically the tagline for the inventor. Inventors build a signature piece of gear, which is either armor, a weapon, or a construct, and then that works only for them because it's so weird and customized that literally no one else knows how to use it. They can then customize this in so many different ways and get a ton of different abilities based on whichever innovation they chose, and then they can use it to eviscerate their targets. They are an intelligence-based martial class, and I love it so much. Plus, they have the silliest feat names possible. The next two classes that I'm going to be talking about are not released as of this video, but I'm still going to be talking about them very briefly, as the core elements of them probably are not going to be changing all that much. The Thaumaturge is a martial character that uses the connections between objects to manipulate the world. Basically, they make a weapon more effective simply due to how weapons are perceived as dangerous by most cultures. Essentially, they're going to be weaponized TV tropes. Psychics are a special type of occult spellcaster who weaponize their own mind, shaping reality based on their imagination and will. Mechanically, they are probably going to have the most abilities related to focus points, and have the ability to empower cantrips and focus cantrips to be far, far more stronger than usual. Once you've picked out the ABCs of character creation, all that's left is picking out feats and you'll be done. But I'm not going to be talking about that as much in this video, since this is meant to be approachable and not multiple hours long, which it would be if I was going over everything about character creation. Instead, I'm going to take the time to expand a bit on what I said earlier about how you don't have to worry too much about making a bad character in 2e. In case you didn't know, basically everything that you do in Pathfinder 2e that you're trained in, you add your level to, which means that you can get away with having much weirder builds than in previous other TTRPGs. As an example, a Halfling Barbarian is pretty hard to make well in Pathfinder 1e or 5e, as the penalty to strength is really, really impactful. In Pathfinder 2e though, your actual strength modifier matters far, far less than your proficiency, and while you won't be quite as powerful as a non-Halfling Barbarian, you'll still be in no way bad. Essentially, so long as you have your key ability score at least a 16 or an 18 at level 1, your character, just simply put, will not be bad, meaning you don't have to stress out over, oh no, I'm gonna let down the party, is this character gonna be unsatisfying to play simply because I chose a subpar option at level 1? And the answer is gonna be, generally speaking, no. Which is an amazing, amazing kind of principle that Paizo went with when they designed Pathfinder 2e. I hope that you've found this video helpful. There are so many things that I didn't cover, simply because I don't have time to, but if you have any questions, then please ask them down below. I might not be able to make a full video going over any questions that you might have, but I will absolutely give guidance or answer any questions that you have. Also, I hope that what I said about classes not being completely defined by singular concepts sticks, since it is incredibly true. If you want to play a martial character who lives out in the woods and hunts for a living, you absolutely don't have to play a ranger. You can be basically any martial class and just get trained in nature and survival. You'll be about as good at nature and survival as a ranger, and it's an incredible part of the system that you can just be super flexible with what you want to do, what you want to do in combat, what's your character concept, and you can basically make anything work. Simply, the way that Pathfinder 2e has been built, it's actively designed to make interesting characters that won't be bad, and I hope that you can find a way to make something work. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. This has been an interesting one to make, since making a character is such a broad concept, and getting my thoughts down in an order has been kind of actually enlightening about my own process that I've been doing unconsciously about character creation. Anyway, what are characters that you've actually really wanted to play in 2e? I personally have been wanting to play a Sprite Flurry Ranger for as long as a Sprite has been out, since calling my character a Beyblade never seems like it won't be funny. And I want to hear what you guys think about characters that you think you won't get the chance to play, but you think would be a lot of fun. I just am a theory craft kind of guy who just makes characters for fun, so I want to hear what you guys think. That's part of the reason why I wanted to make this channel. Regardless of all of that, though, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.